At exactly 2:27 a.m., my phone rang while I was leaving the military base. It was my mother. She wasn't crying. She was trying to. Between broken breaths, she whispered, "Your husband said I was trespassing, then he hit me." The call suddenly went silent. 18 minutes later, I walked into the police station expecting help. Instead, every officer in the room stopped talking. The desk sergeant looked at me. Then his face turned completely white. "Ma'am," he whispered, "please, before you say anything, let us explain." I had no idea that the biggest betrayal wasn't waiting at my house. It was already inside that police station. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 38 years old, and I've spent the last 16 years serving as an officer in the United States Air Force. Discipline, patience, and staying calm under pressure have shaped every part of my life. Those qualities helped me through overseas deployments, impossible deadlines, and emergencies that most people only see in movies. I always believed they would help me through anything. I was wrong. That night, I was leaving the base after a long operational briefing. My shift had run later than expected, and the parking lot was nearly empty. The digital clock on my dashboard flashed 2:27 a.m. as I started my car. Normally, that hour meant one thing: go home. My husband, Daniel, would probably be asleep already. We had been married for 11 years. He could be stubborn sometimes, but I never imagined he was capable of crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Then my phone rang. The screen showed Mom. She never called in the middle of the night. My stomach tightened before I even answered. "Mom." For several seconds, I heard nothing except shaky breathing. Then she whispered my name. "Emily." Her voice sounded frightened in a way I'd never heard before. "What happened?" I asked, already reaching for my seatbelt. I stopped by the house," she managed to say. "I wanted to leave the pie I baked for tomorrow." I frowned. She had always dropped by without needing an invitation. Daniel had never minded. Until tonight. "He said I had no right to be there," she whispered. "He kept telling me to leave." My heartbeat quickened. "Mom, where are you now?" "I'm outside. The neighbors came over." She struggled to finish the sentence. "He pushed me, called me a crazy old woman, then." Her voice cracked. I fell. The line filled with muffled voices. Someone nearby said they had already called for help. Then the call disconnected. I stared at the dark screen for less than a second before throwing the car into drive. Every instinct told me to race straight home. But another thought hit me just as fast. If officers were already responding, the fastest way to understand what had happened was the police station only 18 minutes away. I pressed harder on the accelerator, praying I wasn't already too late. The police station was only 18 minutes from the base. It felt like the longest drive of my life. I kept replaying my mother's trembling voice over and over in my head. He called me a crazy old woman. He pushed me. Every mile made my grip on the steering wheel tighter. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, red and blue patrol cars lined the entrance. The building was brightly lit, but something about it felt strangely lifeless. I hurried through the front doors. The moment my boots crossed the threshold, the room went completely silent. A young officer stopped typing. Another lowered the coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Two deputies who had been talking near the bulletin board suddenly looked away. No one spoke. For several long seconds, every pair of eyes stayed fixed on me. I walked straight to the front desk. "My name is Major Emily Carter," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I'm here about a report involving my mother, Margaret Carter." The desk sergeant looked up. The color drained from his face. He recognized my name. His confident expression disappeared so quickly it was almost frightening. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "would you give me just one moment?" He reached for the phone instead of the incident file. He turned slightly, so I couldn't hear everything. But I caught enough. "She's here." "Yes, sir." "What do you want me to tell her?" When he hung up, he forced an uneasy smile that never reached his eyes. "There seems to be a little misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated. "My mother called me crying less than 20 minutes ago." "I understand." "No," I said. "I don't think you do." Instead of answering, He glanced toward a hallway behind the reception area. A lieutenant appeared almost immediately, as though he had already been waiting. He approached with measured steps and extended his hand. "Major Carter, I'm Lieutenant Harris. I've been informed you're here regarding tonight's incident." "That's right." "If you don't mind," he said carefully, "I'd prefer we discuss this somewhere private." Something inside me shifted. Police officers don't hide routine reports. They don't whisper. They don't delay victims from seeing basic information. And they certainly don't look terrified just because someone walks through the front door. Whatever had happened tonight, it was far bigger than anyone inside that station wanted me to know. Lieutenant Harris led me into a small interview room and quietly closed the door behind us. The room was spotless. A metal table, 3 chairs, a wall clock ticking louder than it should have. He didn't sit immediately. Instead, he folded his arms and took a slow breath. "Major Carter," he began, "before we continue, I need you to understand that we're still gathering information." "I'll understand the facts," I replied. "Nothing else." His jaw tightened. "Your husband came here before you arrived." I felt my stomach sink. "Why?" "He reported an incident involving your mother." "What kind of incident?" Harris looked toward the table before answering. "He claimed your mother showed up unexpectedly, refused to leave, became verbally aggressive, and fell during the argument." I stared at him. "Do you believe that?" He hesitated. "When he first arrived, that's not what I asked." The silence gave me my answer. Daniel had been believed. Without question. "Why?" I asked. The lieutenant rubbed the back of his neck. "Your husband volunteers at several community events with officers from this department. People know him. He's always had a good reputation. So, because he's familiar, his story became the truth?" "No. But it became the starting point." I leaned forward. "My 70-year-old mother called me crying. Does that sound like someone inventing a story?" Before Harris could answer, someone knocked softly on the door. A young patrol officer stepped inside carrying a thin case file. "Lieutenant, you should probably see this." He handed over the folder before noticing me. His expression immediately changed. "I'm sorry, ma'am." He quickly stepped back out. Harris opened the file. His eyes stopped on the first page. Then the second. The confidence he'd been trying to project disappeared. "What is it?" I asked. He looked up slowly. "A witness gave a statement. And they said your mother never raised her voice." I said nothing. He continued reading. "Another neighbor reported hearing your husband shouting long before anyone else came outside." My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. That was the first crack. The truth was beginning to push through. Harris turned another page. "There may also be security cameras facing your driveway." I stood. "Good." He looked surprised. "I don't want favors because I'm in uniform," I said. "I want every witness interviewed, every recording collected, and every report compared to the evidence." For the first time that night, no one in that station argued with me. Within half an hour, the atmosphere inside the station had changed completely. No one was trying to convince me to wait anymore. Instead, officers were making phone calls, requesting recordings, and contacting every witness listed in the growing file. Lieutenant Harris returned carrying another folder. "This just came in." "What is it?" "A neighbor across the street has 2 security cameras." I looked at him without speaking. "They're willing to share the footage." For the first time that night, I felt something stronger than anger. Hope. An investigator connected a laptop in the conference room. Several officers gathered around the screen. No one spoke as the video began to play. The timestamp matched the time my mother had called me. The first clip showed her walking slowly toward my front porch, carrying a covered pie dish with both hands. She paused at the door and rang the bell. Nothing aggressive. Nothing threatening. Just my mother, smiling as she waited. Daniel opened the door. Although the camera couldn't capture every word, his body language changed almost immediately. He pointed toward the driveway. She tried speaking calmly. He stepped closer. One of the detectives quietly paused the video. "You can tell she's backing away." I nodded. "Keep playing." My mother took another step backward. Daniel followed. She raised one hand, not to threaten him, but as if asking him to calm down. Seconds later, she lost her balance and stumbled onto the lawn. The camera angle couldn't clearly show exactly what caused the fall, but it completely contradicted the version Daniel had reported. No one in the room missed that. The detective rewound the footage twice. Then another officer entered carrying printed witness statements. The neighbors' timelines matched the video. Harris compared every page carefully. The first emergency call didn't describe an aggressive elderly woman. He looked at me. It described a frightened one. The room grew quieter. Another investigator walked in holding a flash drive. We found footage from the house next door. He loaded the second recording. This camera captured the driveway from another angle. It showed Daniel pacing before my mother ever reached the porch. Waiting. Watching. Almost expecting someone to arrive. One officer let out a slow breath. I don't like this. Neither did I. Because this no longer looked like a heated misunderstanding. It looked planned. Harris closed the folder and faced the room. From this point forward, he said firmly, we follow the evidence, wherever it leads. Then he turned to me. Major Carter, I owe you an apology. I shook my head. Don't apologize yet. Finish the investigation. If the truth is on our side, it won't need anyone to defend it. No one argued. They simply went back to work. The investigation didn't stop with the security footage. In fact, that was only the beginning. While detectives compared statements and organized evidence, Lieutenant Harris asked a simple question. Major Carter, is there anything else we should know? Financial problems? Marriage issues? Anything that could explain tonight? I almost said no. Daniel and I had argued like any married couple, but nothing that seemed unusual. Then I remembered something. 3 weeks earlier, he had insisted on picking up the mail every afternoon. At the time, I hadn't thought twice about it. Now it felt different. I'd like to go home, I said. Not alone, Harris replied. An officer accompanied me while investigators continued their work. The house looked exactly as I'd left it that morning, except now it felt unfamiliar. Almost like I was walking through someone else's life. In our home office, I opened the filing cabinet where we kept tax records and insurance documents. Everything appeared perfectly organized. Too organized. One drawer didn't close completely. I pulled it open. A plain brown envelope had slipped behind the folders. Inside were copies of financial documents I had never seen. A lease agreement. A utility application. Bank statements. Every document carried Daniel's name. The apartment lease had been signed nearly 2 months earlier. I checked the address twice. Then a third time. He had rented another place without telling me. The bank statements revealed automatic payments, leaving our joint account every month. Small enough to avoid attracting attention. Large enough to pay rent. I felt my heartbeat slow. Not because I was calmer. Because the shock was settling into something colder. Betrayal. The officer quietly asked, Did you know about any of this? I shook my head. Then I noticed another folder tucked beneath the envelope. It contained printed emails with a family law firm. The subject line read, Property Division Consultation. The dates stretched back nearly 6 weeks. He hadn't been reacting to one bad evening. He had been planning an exit for months. Suddenly my mother's visit made sense. She hadn't ruined his night. She had interrupted his schedule. He wanted complete control over the story before I learned the truth. Instead, he underestimated one thing. Lies can survive conversations. They rarely survive evidence. And by sunrise, the evidence was growing faster than his excuses ever could. By sunrise, the investigation looked nothing like it had a few hours earlier. The evidence had grown into a timeline no one could ignore. Security footage, witness statements, phone records, financial documents. Every new piece supported the last. Lieutenant Harris invited me back into the conference room. Several investigators were already there. The atmosphere was calm, but noticeably different. No one questioned my mother's account anymore. Harris slid a completed report across the table. We've updated the case file, he said. The original statement has been corrected to reflect the evidence we gathered overnight. I nodded without reaching for it. What happens now? The investigation continues through the proper channels, he replied. Our responsibility is to follow the facts, wherever they lead. That was all I wanted to hear. Not promises. Not revenge. Just honesty. A few minutes later, the young patrol officer who had delivered the first witness statement approached me in the hallway. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We accepted the first story too quickly." I looked at him for a moment. "You corrected it." He lowered his eyes. "We should have done better." "Then do better next time," I answered. "Someone else's family may depend on it." He gave a small nod. "I will." Later that afternoon, I learned that several people who had defended Daniel's version of events had changed their position after reviewing the evidence. The confidence he had relied on disappeared almost overnight. Not because anyone embarrassed him, because the truth spoke louder than he ever could. As for me, I felt surprisingly calm. The anger that had fueled me through the night was fading. In its place was certainty. I couldn't change what had happened to my mother. I couldn't erase the lies or the betrayal. But I also didn't need to carry them forever. Justice wasn't arriving with raised voices or dramatic speeches. It arrived quietly, one verified fact at a time. And sometimes, that's the strongest kind there is. 6 months have passed since that night. The bruises my mother suffered healed long before the memories did, but every week she grew stronger. She even started baking again, insisting that fear would never be welcome in her kitchen. As for Daniel, our divorce was finalized without unnecessary arguments. The evidence had already answered every question that mattered. There was nothing left for either of us to debate. I sold the house and moved closer to my mother's neighborhood. For the first time in years, our weekends became peaceful. Sometimes we'd sit on her porch with coffee, watching the sunrise without saying much at all. One morning she smiled and asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I thought about that question for a long time. Then I shook my head. "I regret trusting the wrong person," I said. "But I don't regret standing by the right one." She reached over and squeezed my hand. That simple moment meant more to me than any courtroom victory ever could. Looking back, I realized the worst night of my life had also been the night the truth finally found me. If there's one lesson I hope you remember, it's this. Character isn't revealed when life is easy. It's revealed when the truth becomes inconvenient. And no matter how carefully a lie is planned, the truth always has better timing.